All right, what's up everyone? This is Don with Third Creative, and this is the walkthrough tutorial video for NetWork multi-sport Photoshop template. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through all of the layers, the processes, and hopefully cover anything and everything that you might need to know in order to create the best images possible using this design. I'm going to be working with a 2x3 vertical file. Keep in mind that almost everything that we cover with this file is going to apply to the other files as well, the horizontals, the memory mate, the button, game day, etc. There are a few unique things to some of the other files which we'll touch on at the very end with the horizontal team files and also the memory mate. But other than that, everything should be pretty much the same across the board. Let's jump into this. I always recommend that you take a minute or two just to go through and kind of turn on and turn off some layers, just see where everything is, get familiar with the setup. This will help you find things when you're looking for it. You can kind of see where everything is contained or housed. So I like to start at the very bottom. We're going to go to this bottom folder, background layers. We've got a little bit in here. If you go to the bottom of the bottom folder, we have background net images. So if I turn that off, you can see it's basically this black and white net texture images that you see in the background. Now you can open it up and see that there are 3 images here that are arranged to fill these spaces. Really, this is what is making this a soccer or lacrosse or field hockey template. There may be some other outdoor sports that it would work for that I'm not thinking of, but if you were to go in and replace these with some other images related to other sports, find something that works, this template actually could work for more than just outdoor net sports. You really shouldn't have to open this up. You can control the color using this color overlay that I have clipped to this folder. By clicking in this little icon here, it'll bring up your color picker, and you can see we have kind of a mid-gray right now. You can come over into the color and start playing around with it, finding the color that you want. You can go super saturated. You can do just really subtle hint of blue or any color that you want, or you can keep it black and white. You can go lighter and brighter. You can get super dark and contrasty. That is how you would change the color. Now, by default, this layer right here is turned off, but it's labeled adjust contrast of net images. It's a levels adjustment. So if you turn it on, you can see it just really kind of reduces the darker tones. So you can turn this on if you don't want it so bold and contrasty. Another option that you have if you want somewhere in between, and really it's a matter of just finding the color you want and then finding the amount of contrast that you want. So if you're familiar with levels, you can open this up and start to move the sliders around to try to get the look that you want. Another option that you have with this levels adjustment layer selected is to come up to the opacity, and you can start to reduce the opacity, or you can actually type in different values, 50%, 75%. You can find a level of contrast that looks good, for the scheme that you're going for. So that's how that would work. Let's take a look. We have our background frame, or large background frame. It's housed in this folder here. So if I turn that off, you can see, that almost kind of looks cool. You lose some of the text, but you can see it's this large background frame that's white here. You can change the color of it. More often than not, I think white is probably going to be the color of choice, but you can change the color if it works better to not go with white. There is a texture that's clipped to it. So you see this dot, almost like jersey-like texture. This is the layer that's clipped to it. So if you turn it off, you can see that you lose that. This is at, what is that? 15%. So opacity. So you can really make it bold if you bring it up to 100. You can see it gets a little distracting, but you can find a level that looks good for you if the default 15%, you know, isn't quite right when you're adjusting your colors and trying to get the look that you want. But that is everything that is housed in this bottom folder, background layers. Let's jump up to the next one, which is background shape layer options. So let's turn that off and you can see, you know, what we're working with. Basically it's these shapes on the edges and the corners. So let's open it up and have a look. So the very bottom we have sky shape options. If I turn that off, basically it gets rid of the shapes where you see the sky in the background. So let's open that up, and basically you have two options. Hexagon option, so if I turn that off and I turn on the other option, which is circle option, you can do that. Now, I decided to do this because the hexagon really just, to me, screams or says soccer, American football. So if you do another sport and you want to make it a little less soccer, you can go with the circle option. And that is just for these two sky layers. Now, there is an option to change this one, which we'll get to here shortly, but that's how that works. Clip to it, we have two different sky options. By default, it's going to be a daylight, cloudy sky with this color. If you turn that off and turn the one on just above it, it's a night sky option. It's a little more dark and moody, more overcast, so you get a different feel. Now, regardless of which one you choose, you can use these smart filter adjustments to change the look. So we have hue/saturation. If you open that up, it's got some values that I have it set to. If you're not familiar with the hue saturation, it can be a little intimidating at first. You have 3 sliders. You just play with them to get the look that you want. So obviously the top one is the hue. You can change your color. Now you might want something, you know, where you have an unnatural sky look, so you can get a little crazy with the colors. We'll undo that. But really, you're going to want to probably stay in this blue to almost purple range, just this little range right here, and play with the level of saturation. You can play with the lightness and darkness. You can go super saturated, get darker. It's easy to get carried away with it, but that is how you can adjust the color if the default color scheme just isn't quite right. And the same thing is going to apply to your night sky. There is a levels adjustment that is applied to both of them as well, so you can jump in here. And if you're not familiar with levels, basically a quick crash course. This right anchor is going to be your highlights. This middle anchor is your midtones, and this left anchor is your dark tones or dark shadows, your blacks. So I have the highlights boosted by moving this from here to here. You can see what it's doing. So you can make it brighter. You can play with the midtones, going darker, brighter. You can take the dark tones. More than likely you won't need to do this, but it is an option if you really need to fine tune it. Let's see, next we have our background subject images. So that's referring to the subject images that you see over this hexagon shape. So if we open that up, you can see that there are 2 options or 2 subfolders inside it. So we have a hexagon option and we have a circle option. So when you choose, if you're using the default hexagon or if you go with the circle, you will then need to change the folder that you're using for your background subject images. So we would want to turn off hexagon and we would turn on the circle, and then you would want to make sure that you put all of the subject images in this circle folder because it has a mask applied to both that fits perfectly to this shape. Not too complicated, but they do coincide. So just make sure that if you're using circle or hexagon, that you're using the appropriate one for your background images. Now, I think a lot of you will probably want to use this template without using a background subject. So if you want to do that, you just need to turn this red folder off, and more than likely you will want to come down. Let's see, let's go back to the hexagram. You want to come down, open this up, and I've got them labeled large and small. So this large one takes up a lot of real estate, and I don't think it looks very good personally the way that it is without a subject image in it. So select the large hexagon, with your move tool, and I'm going to click on this anchor point, hold down shift, and I'm just going to drag up, and you can move it around, but I would just make it a little bit smaller, but to where it comes above the jersey number or close to it, just where it takes up a little less space. Somewhere in there you can decide, move it around, control the size. That's just my personal preference or opinion. You can leave it the way that it is, or you can change it. That is completely up to you, but that is how you would convert this from a double to a single image. Next we have a subject color grade option. So all this is a color overlay that's clipped to the subject folder. I have it set to red. It is with blend mode of soft light, and the opacity is only at 10%. So if I turn it off, you can just see it. It just has a subtle change, a little extra richness, a little more tone. You can open this up and go with more oranges or yellows. If you start to get into weird colors, you're probably not going to like the look, but I guess it just depends really. You know, if you have a purple sky, you might want to put a little bit of a purple tint to your subject. Just depends on how natural or how dramatic you want it to look. You can also adjust the opacity, but just keep in mind, the higher you go, you know, the crazier it's going to look. So you don't want to get too carried away with that, or you can just turn it off. If you don't want to use the color grading option, you don't have to. What's next? Upper left shape options. So if I turn that off, you can see it is this upper left hand corner shape. If you open it up, you do have the hexagon option and you have a circle option. So you can actually use a combination, if you want, of circles and hexagons, or you can keep it consistent, all circles, all hexagons, all kinds of options. Always have options. To change the color, there is a color overlay on both of them. You just double click on the word color overlay and you get this color picker here, and you can change it to anything that you want. Pretty simple there. There is a drop shadow, which I think I didn't mention. There's also one on the sky shape layer options. You can turn it off or adjust it by double clicking on the word drop shadow, playing with the opacity, playing with the distance, the size. More than likely you'll just leave it the way that it is. Let's see, next we have our swirl pattern overlay, adjust opacity. So basically, if you look, you see this swirl pattern. I have this this pattern clipped to it. Close that out, and you could click on one of these anchors and you can move it around. You could scale it down if you wanted to have, you know, be a little more compressed. You can do a lot of things, but if you want to make it bolder, you would want to adjust the opacity. It's only at 10%, so you can bring it up, but as you will see, it can get to a point where it's definitely distracting. So I try to keep it real subtle but noticeable. The color by default, let's see, where are we, is black. You can change the color if you want to. Go with white. You can play around with that if you want to, but basically it's set up to just create a little bit darker of a tone or color than the color that you select for the shape itself. The idea is for it to be very subtle but still noticeable. And that is it for the background shape layers. Let's keep it moving. We have vertical text layers. So let's look at that. So right here we have sport name. If I turn that off, you can see we lose the word soccer, or at least part of it. We have team name, which you can see is Bulldog here. If I turn that off, and I went ahead and put a lady option in there. You can always duplicate text layers, scale them, position them, arrange them however you need, but hopefully to make it a little easier, I went ahead and put it in there by default. Now you can move it around, you can line it up, make it bigger or smaller. Of course, in your character panel you can control the size of the text, or you can controller command T to transform the size. But you would basically change the color of any of these text layers just the traditional way. So if you have your character panel, you can go here, or if you double click the T on any of these layers to select or highlight them, you'll get a little box up here, and if you click on that, you'll get your color picker and you can adjust the color. Of course, you can change this to, say, this is probably a good time to talk about this. Let's say you want LaCrosse. So I'm just going to double click on it to get the entire layer selected, and I'm going to put caps lock on and just type in LaCrosse. So we'll zoom back out. You can see that's probably bigger than we want it to be. Not only that, but it still has a part of the word soccer right here in white. So if you notice up above it a little bit, that you'll see another vertical sport name green for text layer. So you don't want to move or rescale anything, you just want to change what it says on both layers first. So now they both say LaCrosse, they both line up. Now if you want to scale it smaller, you will select one or the other, and I'm going to hold down Control or Command and click on the other. So now you can see that they're both selected. With your Move tool, which you see that I'm using, you'll click on an anchor. Depending on how yours is set up, you may or may not have to hold down Shift to maintain proportions, but for me, if I don't hold down Shift, you can see it does some weird things. So I don't want that. I'm going to hold down Shift, I'm going to click on this bottom middle anchor point, and I'm going to drag up. And you can stop at any point that you want, but I'll go, let's say, right there. Now you may want to, I use my arrow key left and right since they're both selected still. You may want to bring it in a little bit. You can fine tune that. And then you would just select your other text layers and arrange them how you want them. That is really all there is to the vertical text layers. I'm going to go back to default. Let's talk about this grunge texture over the text layers. If I turn that off, you can see, and if we zoom in, you can see that you just get a solid color. If you turn it on, you can see it adds this texture. Now I have this blend mode as hard light. So let's experiment with this just a little bit by changing the color. Let's say we want a deep red. Well, I went to the most saturated level of red. I can go a little darker, but maybe a more contrasting color. Let's do green. You can see it may not just be as saturated or vivid as you want. So one thing you can do, once you change your colors, if you want to retain this this grunge texture, you can come up here and you can play with some different blend modes. So when I say come up here, you see this window, click the little down arrow, it's set to hard light, you can put it on vivid light, and you can also play with the opacity. So you can bring opacity up or down. You could try overlay, you could try soft light. I'm being super detailed here, but I just found that there were some scenarios when I was creating the sample images where it just didn't quite have the the punch or the saturation boost that I wanted. And so I noticed that just simply by playing around with trying some of the different blend modes, I could get a look that I wanted. So let's go ahead and get it back the way that it was. That's pretty much it for the vertical text layers. Let's jump up here. We have our subject frame, and it says change stroke color. So it says change stroke color because I have the stroke outline on the folder. So if I turn that stroke off, you can see that you lose it. You may want to turn the stroke outline off. Kind of looks cool. It has a couple little drop shadow layers that you could turn off or open up and fine tune them if you feel that it's necessary. But if you want to change the stroke color, make sure all of these are on, double click the word stroke, click on the color box, pick the color that you want. You can also reduce or increase the size of the stroke outline right here by using the slider or entering different values. That's an option. Let's open it up. Here we have the actual shape itself, the shape layer, and this is where you would change the color of the frame or the background frame itself. So very simple, clicking on the word color overlay, clicking on this box, and we've been over this a little bit already, but you can just pick the color that you want. So we're going to stick with red here. If we come up, we have another grunge texture clipped to this layer. So you can see if I turn that off, it just goes solid. Okay. So I have, just like some of these other textures, I have it set to a blend mode of hard light. I do have opacity at 100%. So this is another situation where you can fine tune it by either reducing the opacity if you want to, or you could try some different blend modes. You got linear light, vivid light doesn't really show up, hard light, soft light, overlay. Yeah, I guess it depends on the color you're going with. So if you're all the way up here, you're not seeing it. If you come down a little darker, you do start to see it. So just keep that in mind. But by default, we have hard light. Another option, if you want less contrast, besides reducing the opacity, is to open this levels smart filter that I have. Now I increase some of the midtones and the dark tones. You can see I have 5 here, 80 here, so you can move these around to get different levels of contrast, different looks. So that's completely up to you. So if you wanted, getting really thorough here, if you wanted white, you go here, you see you have white. Okay, well, that maybe you want a little less punch or contrast. So we can draw this down. That's probably the easiest way. I say this, I'm talking about the opacity. You can reduce the opacity, or you could come to the levels and start to play with that. Reduce, down here you can reduce blacks. There's a lot of things you can do. So it's there if you need it. Let's get back to default, which was somewhere in here. Just got to turn these back on. There we go. So next we have vertical sport name. We've already talked about that. You can change the color the simple traditional way. So just keep that in mind. Next we have a subtle paper texture overlay. So if I turn that off, if you look at everything except for the subject and the frame, or actually the subject and I guess this bottom text, you can see it's very subtle, but it adds a little bit of grit. So I'm going to actually zoom in so that we can see a little better what's happening here. So you can see this little subtle paper texture, and it's applying over everything. The blend mode is multiply. Opacity is what, 25%. So you can reduce the opacity if you want a little bit of less of the effect. Or you can turn it off. If you turn it off, you just lose a little bit of that gritty texture. It's very subtle, but I thought it added a extra element to the image or to the design. I thought it looked cool. So you have that as an option, on or off, more, probably not too much, or less. You have the control. Next, we have our subject images. So there's a little bit to talk about here. Let's open it up. Okay, I notice this layer mask is not locked. If you click right in between the folder and the layer mask, you can lock it. I guess I forgot to do that. So inside, so basically this layer mask that is applied to it runs right across this bottom line. So if I turn it off, you can see the legs extend. I have the best way to explain this, because you're probably going to be confused what these are. These are blank layers, and basically these are two different mask options that I found that I needed when I was creating images using this design. So I had a subject who had a flag draped over them, and it went out pretty wide. And so what was happening is the flag was coming out to the sides, and then it was being cut off abruptly here. And so what I wanted was for the athlete to not extend out beyond the edges. If you run into a situation like that, I have this mask in here to hopefully help you, but all you would have to do is click on this mask, drag, let go, say yes. Okay, so now if your subject extends out beyond the sides, you can see there is a cutoff right there, but you can see that it will keep it all in the frame about midway. So you may run into scenarios where you want that. You can use that mask. Now, once you're done with it, you want your old mask back, and actually what I should have done when I moved it over is hold down Option on a, hold down Option on a Mac. Not sure what it is on Windows, but it's right next to Control. Click and drag, and this will basically keep the mask on this little dummy layer here and give you the new mask up here. You can go back to the default by holding down Option, click and drag, hit yes, get your old mask back. I really didn't want it to be that complicated, but there were scenarios where I wanted the athlete's arms to be able to extend out of the frame, and there were scenarios where I found that you don't want that. So that's the best solution that I was able to come up with. Like I said at the very beginning of this video, it's going to be ridiculously thorough, so I will take it a step further, and I will show you how you can create your own mask if you need to. So if you open up this blue folder for subject frame, I'm going to hold down Control or Command, and I'm going to click on this icon here. And it's very subtle, but can you see that we have a selection, the marching ants? So I'm going to come up here. I have my selection still. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to delete this layer mask. Now we don't have a layer mask on here. You can, with this folder selected, subject folder, and you can see I still have my selection, I am going to come down here to this icon and click on it. It creates a mask to the selection that I had. Only problem now is that it cuts his head off. So we got to fix that. So you want to make sure that you have the mask selected. If I come over here, we just have the folder selected. If you click on the mask, you can see it's highlighted. Make sure that you have it highlighted so you know you're working with the mask. Now all you have to do is come up here to your selection tool. I use the square one. And what I am going to do is come up here out of frame, and I'm going to click and drag, and you decide how low you want it to come, where you want it to stop. But we could say right here, and then you'll take your paint bucket tool, you'll make sure that you have white selected, and just click anywhere in this selection, and now you see that we've created this mask. So if you need to do that, that's how you would do it, but hopefully these two dummy masks that I have in here will help you avoid having to go through all of that. So let's back it up. Okay, so to undo my selection, I'm going to hold down Control or Command D to deselect. And the obvious, you place your subject images in here. If you're using automation, it'll scale it for you, but you scale and position them in here how you want them. There is a drop shadow, which is hard to see because I have black. You can kind of see it on his elbow over the E a little bit here, but you can fine tune that or turn that off if you want to. And just like the background subject, we do have a optional color grading layer. It's the same. It's soft light. It's on this red color. It's only 15%. If I turn it off, you can see it's a little less saturated. So you can, of course, open this up, play with the orange and the yellows. Maybe you want a cool tone. If you have a blue purple background, that may work. You can adjust the opacity to an extent, or you can turn it off. It's up to you. I decided to also add a saturation boost, and it's optional. You can turn it off, you can turn it on, but basically it's a saturation layer that's plus 10. So you can increase or reduce this number, but it will apply to every subject that you place in your folder. And I found that when I was creating images for this team that a standard plus 10 was looking good, because we have such contrast and we have these bright vivid colors, this orange, this blue. It's just what I felt looked good. I decided to leave it in there, but of course, just like the other color grading option, it is just that, an option that you can turn off or adjust. All right, we're almost there. The next one we have is lower body cover option. Anyways, we turn it on. You can see it basically created a little dark layer at the lower body. So the reason that I have this here, a couple reasons, but the biggest reason is because we have this signature font, and depending on the uniform color, you may not have the level of contrast that you want in order for this to stand out. I also photographed the girls who did not wear black. They wore white shorts. They both had white jerseys, but boys had black, girls had white. Also, you can see the shirt can extend down lower. It works without it, but you have this option to come up here and turn this on. You can change the color if you want to. There is a gradient mask on here. If you unlock it and you have this mask selected and you use your move tool, let's actually make it red so it's easier to see. But select the mask with your move tool, make sure that it's unlocked. You can click and drag this up if you want it to apply higher. And then the other option is to just redo the gradient mask, which you would select your gradient mask tool. Make sure that you are working with black to white, white to black. And then you would just click and drag up. If you hold shift, it'll keep it straight. And you can control where it starts, where it ends. You can bring it down lower if you don't want full opacity. But it's as simple as that. And you can keep redoing that as much as you want to. If I come back to it, it should still be there. If not, you just click and drag to make a new one. It's that simple. All right. Let's go back to, wait, no, black. There we go. So that is an option, and basically I have it in this folder because I don't want it extending out beyond the frame, so that's why this mask is here. And then this mask is obviously the gradient that creates the fade of opacity. Turn that off. Next we have lower text layers. Almost done, getting there. There's a lot going on in here though. This will take a minute. So starting off right out of the gate, we have two different first name font options. So this one is a little more aggressive, nothing crazy. And then this one is a little softer. So you can decide what scenarios you want to use. If you want it a little prettier, a little softer, you can go with this option in the seafoam color, or you can stick with the default, which is a little more, I don't think aggressive is the right word, but you get the idea. So next I have 4 subtext layers here. It's classification, but they are subtext layers that can be changed to say anything that you want. But we have junior, senior, sophomore, freshman, etc. Down here we have the year, which you can see right here. All of these layers, you change the color the traditional way. In your properties or character panel, you can see we have these little color boxes. And then as always, if you were to double click on the actual T icon to highlight your text, you should get the option above. So pretty simple. Let's see. Down here we have a lower center tab. So if you turn it off, you can see it goes away. If you open it up, there's a shape layer in here, a color overlay effect, which is what you would click on in order to change the color. So if you go with a very saturated red, we have this grunge texture clipped. So just like all the other textures, you can play with the opacity, you can reduce the opacity, you can leave it at 100, you could change hard light, you can go with overlay, and then if you do that, you would just want to come into your color and not have a color that's all the way at the top in order for it to show up. But anyways, you have options to control the level of contrast, but more than likely maybe just opacity would work the best. But that is how you would change the color. You may want to change the positioning or the shape. So with your move tool and with this layer selected, I'm going to hold down shift and click on an anchor point, click and drag up or down. If you do that, if you need to do that, you probably want to make sure that you have, hold down controller command and click on the grunge texture so that you're adjusting both at the same time. But you can make it bigger or smaller, and you can always move it up or down. Another option that you have is to move, let's see, separate the 20 and the 25. So if you were to click on this, click in the middle and just use your space bar to get it out there. Now you have 2025. If you have a nice school logo, you can place it right there, which I did for this team, but took it out for the template. That's how you would get just a different look. All right, what else we got? All right, we've got swirl pattern, which is clipped to, we've got jersey number, last name, and lower tab. So basically what I did is I put everything in this folder that I wanted this swirl pattern that matches the swirl pattern at the top left. So you can see it applies to, which actually I want to get rid of that red, it's bugging me. It applies to the last name, this tab, and this jersey number. So everything that applies to is housed in this subfolder. So here you're going to see your last name. You would change the color the same traditional way, properties, character, or up here in your toolbar. It has a drop shadow that can be turned on or off or adjusted. Let's see, inside we have our lower tab shape layer. So it's this additional tab. If I turn that off, you would control the color with this color overlay. Pretty simple. And then next we have jersey number. So this is something I need to touch on. I was really trying to figure out the best way to do this. So some of you use automation. Some of you do each of them on your own. There's more than one way to create your images, and so the way that I did it was by, I'm going to turn this off, is by using a smart object. So I'm going to turn on that option, open this up. So with this, If you use the smart object, you can change the jersey number by double clicking on the smart object, double clicking on the T icon, changing the number, hitting the check mark, closing it, make sure you hit save, and as you can see, it updates the number and all of the repeating text that fades down. Then you would just need to adjust your colors, which, since it's a smart object, I put a color overlay on it, so you could change it. It does have a stroke outline, so if you click on the word stroke, you can change the color or size of the stroke outline, or you could turn it off depending on what you want, but it would automatically update here. I'm sorry, the color won't automatically update, so you would need to click on the color overlay for this folder here that houses or contains the repeating jersey number text layers, and just pick a color that's going to match, and that way you don't have to type the additional text layers. The option above is basically the traditional way, which if you're using automation, you would probably have to name these layers certain things that match your CSV file, so it would automatically put that in there so that you could get all of the repeating text layers. The other option, if that's just too much for some of you, which I completely understand if it is to just turn off the repeating part and just stick with a jersey number that you can scale and position anywhere that you want, and just have one. So, you know, it's just a personal choice on if you want to take the extra time, do the extra work, or if you want to keep it simple, or if you just want to not even have jersey number there at all. All of these choices are yours to make, completely up to you. But just to explain, I created two options, one to save you from having to type them all, and then the other the traditional way, depending on how you would want to do it. I think that's it. Yeah, that is it. The only other thing is touch on a couple of things with the horizontal team file and a memory mate. So let me get the team file pulled up and we'll keep it moving. Alright, so now I have the 3x2 horizontal file pulled up. Really the only thing I want to touch on is regarding the subject rows folder. This is where you will insert and arrange your subjects. If you choose to use the subfolders that I have created, I have row 1, which you can see I can turn off. We have row 2, and we have row 3. So you can use 1, 2, or 3 rows, or if you prefer more rows, you can duplicate any of these, or just add your own new layer folder, title it, row 4, and then you would just need to add your gradient mask. So let's talk about that. If you need to adjust the gradient mask, this is the layer mask that fades the legs out. Okay, so if I turn that off, you can see what happens. It's real simple. We talked about it earlier, but select your gradient tool, make sure the mask is selected, make sure that you have black to white, white to black, and then you would just hold down shift, click, and I have that backwards, so let's grab the white, bring it up, or start over, click shift, drag down. Now you just adjust these points to your liking, and you can do that on any of these folders for any of the rows. So once you have your subjects arranged, you can adjust the gradient mask so that it looks right. Let's see. The only other thing is that we have our lower frame color option. So if I turn this off, what you see is that this texture shows all the way through. Now, I don't like the way that looks with legs fading into this texture, unless it's like a fog or smoke texture that makes sense. I don't like that. So this layer inside the frames behind subject, it'll be turned on by default, but you can do the same thing. You can adjust the gradient to how it applies and you can adjust the color to match the color that you select for the texture itself. And so all of these things may need to be fine-tuned or adjusted, but that is how you would do it. Now the next thing is the memory mate, and this is set up a little bit differently. And I tried doing it the way that I have been, where you just basically, let's say this was your 5x4, you would save it as a JPEG, and then all you have to do is drag and drop it into the memory mate file and arrange it. But I just didn't like the way that it looked. Some designs that works great for. This is not one of those designs, unfortunately, and so I had to set it up a little bit differently. You have your subject image folder, so you would just insert your subject images there, scale them, and have them run out of frame or the canvas. This other red folder is where you would insert your team image. And so the way that I suggest that you do it, you obviously don't want to build your team all over again in this folder. So once you've created your team image, I'm using the 3x2, but the 5x4, whichever. Basically, if you hold down Shift, click on the top row, hold down Shift, click on the bottom row, and let's see, if we right click, we can do duplicate layers. So now we've created a duplicate and we have all of them selected. And then what I would do is come down and click on this folder. And now it's put them all into one folder. Or you could probably just hit right click, and we're looking for merge group. There you go. So now you've got everything in one layer that you can click and drag up here, drag and let go. Now I would probably convert it to a smart object, because if you're scaling it up and down and trying to adjust it, you don't want it to lose, you don't want it to do permanent damage to your pixels. It starts to look weird and bad. But now you can just scale and position in the frame. We'll turn off this one. But that's it. Simple as that. So hopefully not too complicated, but it is different. I did want to talk about it. This video is super long. They always are. But, I cover anything and everything, or try to, on purpose, not to make the videos long as heck, but really just to make sure that anything you run into, I give you an answer for, or a solution for. If there is anything that I have not covered, as always, you're welcome to reach out. You can email me at don@thirdcreative.com. But that is it. So thank you for watching. Thank you for picking it up if you have, or if you will. And I hope it serves you well, makes you lots of money. And until the next one, we'll see you.